Hi, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of Make Business Better. I'm Zach Seward. Throughout this, our second set of the show, I've been trying to get a little bit more personal with our guests about challenges they've faced over the last 18 months, because who doesn't have a ton of stories like that? How they overcome those challenges. And more recently, in the last few episodes, kind of become obsessed with the question of how companies really truly mix the social purpose with being a for-profit enterprise. There's no company in the, or at least that's has consumer-facing businesses that doesn't in some way try to portray itself as socially conscious or doing good for the world, and all power to them. But there's another type of company that really embeds one or more social purposes into the core of their work. And we've got one such company as an example of that today, and lucky to have David Heath, the CEO of Bombas, which makes very, very comfortable socks that I can attest to because I'm wearing them right now, along with a ton of other comfortable apparel. I haven't tried, but I'm sure it's just as comfortable. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I was going to go into the story and background of Bomba's origin myself, and then realized I got the CEO and co-founder on the line. So why don't we, for folks who may not be familiar with the company and that backstory, if you just give a quick background on where the company began.
Yeah, so it all started with a quote on Facebook. I was working at a media company, and I came across a quote that said socks are the number one most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. And admittedly, I wasn't like, here's Eureka, here's the next billion-dollar global apparel brand. I was like, wow, that's pretty sad. Here's an item of clothing that I've never spent more than a few seconds a day thinking about, and many of us haven't. And yet it's being perceived as a luxury item for over 650,000 people living here in the US and even more globally. And I was very interested in entrepreneurship. I went to school for entrepreneurship. So I considered entrepreneurship to be a bit of a hobby. I knew that eventually I wanted to start and run my own business. And I think, like most entrepreneurs, I walked around this world with my eyes and ears open and just looking for that next idea. And
What were you doing at
where
the time?
I was working at a media startup. So early stage, I was the seventh employee. We were growing very rapidly. I kind of took my career. I always like treated my career as kind of MBA, right? Like, how can I work at different places to build the skill sets of the things in the industries that I thought I would eventually work in, and digital commerce or digital media. Like, it was an area that I felt like I'd probably adapt myself to. Um, and so, I came across this quote, and where the eureka moment happened was, I think maybe a month or two later, I was watching some TED talk from Blake Mikowski, the founder of Tom's, and he was like, "Oh, I found out that kids in Argentina and Africa, don't have shoes, and so I created a shoe company that donates." And I was like, "Oh, it's like maybe I could like borrow this business model, that at the time was so successful for them." And apply it to the sock industry, or the sock market. And so spent 2 years on product development. Learned everything I could learn about the sock industry. And admittedly, again, I wasn't like, this is going to be a huge business. I was just like, okay, like this is interesting. It solves a problem in the world. I get fascinated by learning new things, and I was like, I had no experience in manufacturing or creating a product or apparel. So I just got really fascinated about like, okay, how do I build something? How do I create something? And then like creating a physical product for me was like, I just fell in love with it. I was like, I can't believe I have this idea in my head and I can turn it into something that I can, personally use.
Mm.
And so that was kind of the genesis of it all. And our whole thesis was like, okay, donate a lot of socks. You need to sell a lot. And if you're going to sell a lot, you've got to create, in our opinion, like the best sock in the history of feet, and do it for a very, very broad market. And that's kind of what we've been executing on for the last 8 years.
Cool. So I really appreciate the way you took us through that story, because the corporate profile version of it is that it does suggest that the Facebook quote was the eureka moment and like everything. But of course, anyone who knows anything about business knows it's always more complicated than
Much.
that. And what I think is so interesting, and again, I appreciate the way you talked about it just then. Is what we're talking about is a veritable charitable purpose, and a really important one at that. That to has largely been the domain of charities and nonprofit organizations. So, in this case, supplying clothing to their communities. But we're also talking about a marketing strategy, right? Or a business model, as you referred
Mhm.
to it, the buy one, give one model, or one purchased, one donated, like, which has, thanks to you and others, become a popular model that does seem so. What's so popular about it? What it is effective about it as a marketing strategy? And then we'll come back to, I want to hear more about how it developed as a charitable purpose.
Yeah, I think what's effective about it is kind of twofold. And I think for us, there's I'm a big fan of like Simon Sinek's why, right? Like the why do companies exist and the purpose
Mm,
behind them. For us, it all started with this idea of solving this problem. That was like our why. And it was validated by the fact that socks specifically don't get donated to homeless shelters for hygiene purposes, right? They're a wear through item. Most of us wear them until they get a hole in them when we throw them out. And so it requires people to go out and buy new socks, or homeless shelters to go out and buy socks, take budget out of their own, funds to go out and purchase these products. And then similarly, if you're someone who's living on the street and walking around as your main mode of transportation, I mean, any of us, you could spend a day, without a t-shirt if you have a sweatshirt. You could spend, if you have a jacket, you can wrap yourself up. Socks are the kind of the one layer that if anybody's ever walked around in the wrong pair of shoes for a day and you've gotten a blister, you realize that like socks become this, this really, really important, clothing item. And most homeless people who are street homeless, they don't take their shoes off at night because they're fear of their shoes getting stolen. And so it creates a lot of like foot hygiene issues. And so it solved a real problem. And similarly, because these items weren't being donated, it like the model worked really, really well from a solution standpoint. From a marketing standpoint, I think the popularization of one for one is that it's highly, highly quantifiable for the consumer, right? The consumer knows I'm buying one of this, and then a like item is going to be donated. When you do the like 1% for the planet, or we donate 10% of our profit, like, no, the consumer doesn't know what 1% of your revenues are. So they're just like, well, 1% of my purchase at $60 is 6 cents. They're like, I don't know, is that good? I
Should I
don't know.
take
Like,
I could take 100% of that money and
right. I don't
donate.
know how to like quantify, like, and what
Yeah.
we've also learned over the years being in a consumer brand is that like consumers don't like to do math. So like this is why you see on websites, if they say like, oh, here's our pack discount 5%, there's a strike through of like what that pack 5% actually translates to in terms of dollars. So again, consumers don't like to do math. So this makes math really easy, solves a real problem in the community. And so it kind of just all lined up to be a really, really
It's
great model for
it's
us.
literally tangible
Yeah.
manifestation of it. Yeah, if I may, I'd summarize your answer there as it worked because it wasn't bullshit.
Hmm.
And when
I like to say authentic, but yeah,
yeah,
bullshit works.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's fair. That's totally fair. And I think about obviously lots of startups that come and go. I don't want to pick on just one, but as an example, I was early days of WeWork, you know, totally different industry, but similar to yours in that like office space, pretty like old, well entrenched, lots of
Sure.
competitors, just like retail. And like the insight, according to this narrative there, was like we're gonna do co-working, which existed everywhere, but it's gonna be eco-friendly.
Hmm.
And like that was the twist in how they grew. And so, and you do see a lot of that, especially in highly competitive markets, where like the it's like we're gonna do it, but the twist is it's gonna be not terrible or good, good for
Right.
X cause. And um, it's heartening to see that like it turns out you can't just say that for one, but also like um, sometimes that ends up working, and it seems like when it works, it's because it's sort of endemic to how the company operates. So maybe to come back to you guys, I want to make you comment on other companies' approach, but like, was there ever a moment? Let's say you start growing, seeing that this people love the socks, and the offer of buy one and donate one is incentivizing them, I assume, to purchase. And is there ever a moment where like, well, this is getting expensive? Maybe we'll maybe buy two, donate one, or like, yeah. Was there ever a conversation like that along the way?
It'd be quite the opposite. I think as we grew, we saw economies of scale,
Fair.
and and we also like, I think any consumer business, this was a category that we were trying to play in a different space. Or you had like your low cost, low quality competitors that dominated the market. The Hanes Fruit of the Loom jockey, you're buying 12 pairs in a plastic bag for $12. And then there was the endemic category, which was more focused on performance and high end, and $18 ski and athletic and running and whatever. And our whole thesis is like, take the technology from the performance side and bring it to the mass market. Not dissimilar to what Starbucks did with coffee, right? Like take boutique coffee roaster quality and bring it to the mass market,
Hmm.
to kind of upend Folgers or Dunkin' or whatever. Um, and so our our starting hypothesis was like, all right, we don't really know where to price this product. So we kind of like just picked an arbitrary price of $9 and felt like, as it was under $10 pairs, as you bought multiples, it didn't ratchet. And we're like, okay, this seems really good. And then we did some pricing analysis and realized that we could increase prices based on price to quality discrepancies from the consumer's mindset. And so we were able to increase margin, increase volume, and in all of that ultimately worked to our favor to then drive the cost of our donation item, which interestingly we started out for the first year donating the same exact item that we sold, because my whole again, kind of lead with purpose, my whole philosophy and value was, why should someone living on the street not experience the same level of comfort and that our customer, our paying customers are getting. And then we ultimately ended up re-engineering the donation sock to be something that was more specific to the needs of the homeless community. So we treated it with antimicrobial treatments, reinforced the seams, greater durability, darker colors to minimize visible wear, and then the consolidation of that donation item to one, to just a few SKUs as those numbers increased over time, again gave us a
Mm.
ton of leverage from a margin perspective. So yeah, it actually became cheaper for us. Our mission has never been in question. In fact, it's always the opposite. We're always like saying like, oh, how can we do more? And there's a lot of things that we do that we don't talk about. We've bought washers and dryers for homeless shelters in our network that when they break. We've donated money. We've donated volunteer hours and services. But again, from a marketing perspective, keep the message pretty simple and straightforward for the
Uh,
consumer.
Well, that was a much more interesting answer than I was expecting. I just expected a no, we never thought about it, but in fact, it sort of reinforces the idea like that it's not always going to be possible that the social cause is in lockstep, in line with the business model, the for-profit business model. But in this case, it is, and that's like a fantastically efficient way to do good.
Mm.
How has it affected what it's like to work at Bombas? Like, how does like that mission um imbued in throughout the company? I have to imagine people are proud of it. What is like? Are there ways, or how does it how is it lived as an employee of Bombas?
Yeah, this is one of those things that like, I think we're more surprised today by the importance of mission in our company culture, and the importance to an individual, than I think we ever thought it was. I think you're the founder. You're like, yeah, it's important to me. I lived it. I got out there. I was donating socks. I came up with the idea. I got really close to it, and then you kind of feel like anybody who walks in the door is going to tell you that the mission is important to them, because
Mhm.
it's a way to kind of get the job. And so we always kind of like, we're like, they probably just said that because they feel like they had to. What's been surprising to me is, I think, not only reflective in our retention numbers. We've had very, very little turnover, and consistently when you ask people, the mission has been one of the biggest drivers, right? Because I think if we're hiring people from Facebook and Netflix and Amazon and Google, and the ability for someone to say like, well, I can earn a salary somewhere, but if I can earn the same salary somewhere else, and be a part of a high growth exciting environment, but I also get to find purpose in my job, and feel like I'm actually contributing, it becomes self-selecting, I think, of a group of highly talented but also mission motivated people. Not dissimilar to consumers, right? There's a subsegment of consumers that will have a willingness to pay more for a product that they know is doing good for the world, or environmentally sound. And I think we see a similar translation to our employees. Where it shows up most for me is, we offer the ability for employees to volunteer, either before work, during work, or after work, depending on their schedule. And we have a team. Part of our team is dedicated to creating these kind of what we call like giving events, working with our local charity partners to find time and ways for people to give back, whether it's virtually through services, whether it's in person by going out on kind of street programs. And every time that the community volunteer calendar goes live in the beginning of the month, it fills up within an hour. It's like really remarkable. And you're talking about, 50 plus hours of volunteering. And then you see people who are kind of going out of their way, beyond, what we offer them. And it just reinforces. So it has become a hallmark of our company culture. And I think an incredible differentiator from a talent acquisition and retention tool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was wanted to switch gears for a second and talk about one other choice you've made that seems to have, or at least had a big impact on the company's identity. But I want to hear more about how it's lived and where it came from, which is the approach to customer service. My understanding is you guys give your customer service agents pretty wide latitude. Um, you know, Companies that come before you, like Zappos, have shown that like that can be a big competitive advantage. This one's not in in the category of philanthropy, but it's a cost, I'm sure, and probably
hmm
more expensive than some other ways of handling customer service. So you could give us a little more detail about how you approach it, and then more importantly, why, and has it, well, and why.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the way that we run the customer facing elements of our business, and I think part of the advantage that I have as being a founder who doesn't come from the apparel or product world, is that I came at this business as a consumer, right? So like I tallied up all of the experiences I had, good and bad, over the years as a consumer, and I got to hand pick and say like, okay, these are the experiences where I experienced incredible brand loyalty and affinity, and here are the ones where I felt detractors,
Were
and
there
I just
brands, so sorry to interrupt, were there brands that were inspiring to you in terms of the
yeah, I mean,
customer service?
not surprisingly, like Nordstrom's has always been
Mhm.
one, and not just because of the stories you hear, but I remember very distinctly. I went to Nordstrom's with my mom, and my little sister was 3 years old, and I think had like kicked a rubber boot out of the car, and don't know where when. And
Mhm.
she so my mom brought it in and was like, oh, I have the can I buy another a new pair of these? And the guy was like, don't worry about it, this one's on us, and like just gave her a free pair of like rubber boots. And it's just like that moment just like embedded in my mind. I was like, oh my god, this is like what a great organization. And then
Mm.
obviously the famous tire story and all those things. But as a result, when we first started the company, I handled customer service for the first 12 months. We were kind of like bootstrappy, and I didn't have resources, to necessarily hire dedicated full-time staff. And I was above wanting to outsource it. And I was like, I want to be really close to the consumer and understand how they're reacting to the product and what the feedback is. But I think that kind of like founding story of like me doing customer service for the first 12 months embedded the importance of customer service going forward. And so having dealt with customers and knowing, this makes them happy, this makes them upset, I had kind of a little bit of a playbook that I could guide our team around. And it became around this concept of like, you know, I didn't like the idea of customer service. I like the idea of calling it the customer happiness team, right? Because like if we're delivering, that's like the main goal is to deliver happiness to the customer above all and else. And so we developed our 100% happiness guarantee. And the reason it was broad and vague is because we wanted to capture a lot of different experiences. So today the marketing and creative teams had a lot of fun with it, where we've adapted it to the dog the dog chew guarantee or something, where if your dog chews up one of your pairs of socks, we'll replace it for free. If we have the kid growth guarantee. If your kids outgrow their socks within a year, like, we'll replace them for free.
I have a
There's really
4-year-old
not.
and did not know about that. Sorry. All right.
Yeah, we have the laundry back guarantee. If you ever lose a pair, or a sock in the laundry, like, let us know and we'll replace it for free. So this kind of all encompassing idea that like there's no ask that goes above and beyond. And we have one of our famous like Nordstrom-esque stories is that someone emailed the company and said like, that their Dremel tool broke. And we don't sell Dremel tools, but our customer service agent went out and like bought the Dremel tool and like shipped it to the customer.
Yeah.
And we just think like these are like really fun and funny things. We
Yeah.
legitimately had someone call and say that their socks were abducted by aliens, and they were like serious about it. Like, it was not like a joke. And so we were like, okay, like now we have like the alien abduction guarantee. And so like we just having a lot of fun with it. And what we've learned over the years is that, look, anybody who runs a digital, direct to consumer business knows the cost. I mean, even if you're not, the cost of marketing and attracting and retaining and acquiring customers is so expensive. So once you have them, the cost is relatively minimal to keep them as a customer and get them to continue to come back and rebuy. So that we see these investments, which are investments, as fractional of what it costs to actually go out and acquire that customer. So um, we kind of feel like the ROI is there and translates into high NPS, high repeat rates, loyalty, all the metrics that are important for a growth
Sure.
business.
And time will tell, but I would imagine that the hope is that also lower marketing costs over time, because you won them over with the free boot in the parking lot as a child, and that's if that's actually a customer for life, the lifetime value is certainly worth the boot.
Hmm.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation for me, because like the key theme I keep taking away from these anecdotes is how important it was to embed that purpose, or make in the case of getting more socks to homeless people who needed it, or make that decision in the case of how you're going to handle customer service yourself, or and this is going to be a top priority of the company really early on, for it to have been successful down the line. And easy for you to say now in retrospect, but I think of like most other companies don't have that the luxury of starting from scratch, but might be realizing that it is crucial to embed more purpose in their own work, to engage like their employees on their own on a charitable endeavor that you can collaborate with them on, or that the customer base is potentially motivated by the whether the company is actually good, doing good for the world or not. Like, is it possible to make that shift, or is that like, have I identified the strategic advantage of companies like yours that it's not possible?
I think it's possible to make the shift, right? You see, I just think it takes a lot longer and it takes more energy and effort and resources. I mean, you see brands today like Delta making commitments around, being, carbon neutral in 5 years, or brands like Volkswagen saying that by, 2025, they'll no longer produce a gas powered car. Um, but then you've got Tesla, right, which is like clearly winning in the market because like they came out of the gate and they
Right.
stood for something. They were a leader, not a lagger.
Hmm.
And so I think anytime that you're a laggard, um, look, you've got to do the tremendous amount of work to undo or overcome, uh, the brand perception, around this idea of authenticity. And I think it just takes more work. I think it's possible,
And
but I
rightful
think it just
consumer
takes a lot more work.
skepticism of this
Sure.
stuff too, 'cause, you know, people are getting more sophisticated and, understand that, a lot of terms get thrown around that may be, um, meaningless. And speaking of that, my last question or topic I wanted to touch on before we go is Bombas is a B Corp. Both in a legal sense, it's a legal structure, but also a certified B Corp by under the standards set by B Lab. What eh, real quick, what has that how important has that been as a business? Is that more about like the community of other companies that are like-minded whom you're connected to? Or is it do customers care or even know what a B Corp is?
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to validate, I think, through metrics what the impact has been. Early on for us, I think it started more as it's important for us to be it because it's important to us, right? Like,
Mhm.
again, it was like the reason
And
why it's like
why
we didn't do it for marketing. We did it because it's important to us, right? It's
and
like
why was it important to you?
I think, as a way to kind of quantifiably validate that we had commitments, to being a benefit corporation. And for those that are listening that don't know, right, it's not like, oh, you pay a fee and you just get this kind of B Corp stamp. And we don't qualify just because we donate socks, right? Like you have
Right.
to fill out a really comprehensive, like, uh, you know, test, that you have to answer all these questions around, like, what's your maternity paternity policy, what's your like sick day policy, what's your commitment to environmental, what's your commitment to the community, like how do you
Oh,
treat your employees, like all of these like
I think it's
very
fair.
very
It's analogous to a financial audit in its
Exactly.
rigor.
No, it
Yeah.
is. That's a great analogy. And so, like, it's this broad level commitment, that we, I think, more importantly, internally wanted to say, like, yeah, we walk the walk, right? And we're not doing it because it's going to increase our marketing ROAS by 4%, or we're going to get this. Like, the same reason that we didn't start saying we're going to donate socks because we want to be a $1 billion company. We said, like, we want to donate socks because we want to, solve this problem in our community. And so similarly, we said, like, let's be a B Corp because it's important to us, not because it's really important to anybody else. Over the years, I think it's gotten more awareness. I don't think it's gotten the awareness that I think a lot of people who seek out the, I think a lot of people come to it being like, oh, does your B Corp thing increase conversion rate, or does it, help with customers? I'm like, I think for the ones that look for it, yeah, it helps, but it's not, I don't think it's materially moving the needle. More so, it allows us to stand up with a tremendous amount of authenticity and validity to say, we do what we say we're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like it maybe matters now. It better matter a lot more in the future when uh when there needs to be a separation between the more authentic and more bullshit claims around social good, and when companies are public and basing their part of their value on their environmental social governance responsibilities, like that's actually going to need a rigorous standardization, whether it's coming from B Lab or others. So consumers are protected and they're not buying stuff that's not actually having the effect that they desire.
Yep.
Well, David, this has been really instructive for me. I hope for our listeners as well. I really appreciate your coming on. I was saying to you right as we got on, throw a bunch of softballs because questions in the sense that, like, how well, tell me how great, why being such a great company has made you an even better one. But what I was going to say, we didn't get a chance to, is, but I want to make sure we get to the challenges of that and where and the real story behind how that developed as a company. And I didn't need to say it because you did it yourself, and I really appreciate that, because that's that well, I think it goes a long way for our listeners who might want to, build a similar kind of company. It turns out it's not a to B sort of story. There's a lot in between. So thank you for sharing
Never
that.
is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good luck. I know this is by far the busiest time of year, so for any apparel company. So thanks for taking 30 minutes to chat with us, and good luck getting through the holiday season.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Sure.